Hello everybody and welcome to another video. For today's video we are going to be gangster leaning all the way back to 2005 to check out 50 Cent Bulletproof for the good old PS2. Now this also released on the Xbox and there was a port of sorts for the PlayStation Portable. Bulletproof was the first of two video games released to feature the New York-based rapper and entrepreneur, with Blood on the Sand following in 2009. Now, where to begin with this one? Now, as you can probably tell, I am definitely the authority when it comes to all things 50 Cent. You know, much like him, you can typically find me in the club on Shorty's birthday or any other celebration. Seriously though, I don't know how much I really need to say about 50 Cent. He is, after all, one of the most well-known rappers of the 2000s and 2010s, both as a solo artist and through his association with groups like G-Unit or artists like Dr. Dre or Eminem. He was born Curtis Jackson. His initial attempt at a rap career were cut somewhat short in the late 90s, as his life was nearly cut short when he was famously shot about 9 times, and this resulted in what would have been his first album back then being shelved. But he did come back from that, and, you know, fair play to him, because I struggle to get up from bed if my leg has a bad cramp, never mind being shot. But there he would go on to release In the Club in the early 2000s, which went to huge success worldwide. That and the albums from Get Rich or Die Trying would also see huge worldwide numbers. And then a few years later, he'd follow that up with the album The Massacre in 2005, which featured the hit song Candyshop, which is almost certainly not about a fun-filled trip to get some sweets for a fun movie night. I will be totally honest, I was not a fan of 50 Cent when he first came to prominence. I was very much a very typical teenager. I was only into rock and metal. The only rap I tended to like was Eminem, who, weirdly enough, was the guy who discovered 50 Cent. And of course, you know, maybe for some people shamefully, I liked little bits of new metal here and there, like Linkin Park and the occasional Limp Bizkit song. To my more immature and snobbish self, 50 Cent was what was wrong with modern music. He was all about being a brand and superficiality. He was only in it for the money, which is a hilarious viewpoint, because I knew of Kiss back then, and if we're talking about anyone in it for the money, it was most certainly those lads right there. Now, as I've gotten older, my outlook has changed. I learned more about that sort of music, the culture around it. I stopped being as snobby about music that wasn't within the genre I liked, and came to understand that it's okay to like things that are a little bit lighter and just for the fun of it. It doesn't have to mine the depths of the human experience for it to be good. Okay, I'm very heavily into prog rock, which is why I kind of say that. But sometimes it's fun to have a song about partying or rocking out or being in an establishment that serves alcoholic beverages. Of course, I wasn't, and I'm not the only one with that attitude. There were certainly many back then, and there are many now, and worryingly, some of those people are fully grown adults. 50 Cent attracted a great number of haters, so when there was a game announced based on him, there were a lot of people who weren't keen on it. There were the usual accusations of it being a cash grab, something that would be badly made to sell, about someone who was popular in what was, you know, a vastly growing medium at that point with the games industry. In a way, understandable concern, because even to this day, licensed games based on properties or celebrities do not have the best track record. So one based on 50 Cent, well, how could that be good? Well, if you take a bit of time to think about it, there are many ways it could be good and could be done. Obviously, there's that caveat of if it's done right, but there is the potential there. You have this roster of characters ready with 50 Cent, G-Unit and his affiliated people. And to go back a couple of years, we'd seen the Def Jam fighting games do really well with rappers involved. You had the iconic setting of New York City. You have this library of music and culture to pop in there. If you get some decent gameplay and the concept behind it, off you go. So what did we get? Well, originally it was planned to be an open world game, not dissimilar to likes of Grand Theft Auto or True Crime, that sort of thing. But because of a mixture of tight deadlines and budget constraints, that was not going to be possible. So Genuine Games went for a more straightforward shooter. You play as 50 Cent, and you are on a quest for vengeance after being shot several times when trying to find your friend K-Dog and get him out of a bad situation. On his quest for vengeance, 50 uncovers a plot with far-reaching consequences. A simple premise, but effective. How did it fare? Unfortunately, it didn't go over too well with the critics. Metacritic has the PS2 version scoring just below 50%. The Xbox version hovers around that as well. There are a few outlets who were incredibly down on it. Edge gave it a 2 out of 10, Eurogamer gave it 4 out of 10, GameSpy gave it 1.5 stars. Now, this wasn't the only thing, there were a few outlets that were a bit more positive. CVG actually gave it a 7. Game Informer gave it a 6, and IGN gave it a somewhat respectable 6.5. The general consensus was that the storyline was decent, the music and presentation was good, but the general gameplay did drag it down. Now, this is the kind of game that I actually really do enjoy checking out, and I've been excited to try this one out for quite some time. In the past, we've seen critics take aim at a few games that turned out to be nowhere near as bad as they said. So I am intrigued to see how this one plays out. Will it be as bad as they say, or could this be a little bit of a hidden gem? Let's find out. Our story begins with 50 Cent getting a phone call from his mate K-Dog, who seems to have gotten themselves into a little spot of bother. They arrange to meet, and 50 gets himself all strapped up and invites his lads from G-Unit along to meet up and find out what's going on. It's a neat little introduction, it's well shot, can't fault the presentation, and it's what I would expect. As is the little bit afterwards when we get to the meeting point, because it is absolutely kicking off. We're given control of Mr. Cent, and we have to fight our way through what seems to be some heavily armoured and serious looking goons. Control-wise, the control scheme here is fairly standard for the time, but it has elements of clunkiness to it. There is something of a cover system as well, where you can go up against the wall, press the appropriate cover button, and it'll pop you against the wall. But I did find in this mission and throughout my entire playtime this system to be incredibly cumbersome. The opening level plays out exactly as you expect. Fight some goons, get to an objective, fight more goons. It's a tutorial level. But at this point, it did take some getting used to how 50 moved, the aiming mechanics, and maybe it was a tuning thing on my part, but I found it incredibly hard to keep up with how quickly the enemies moved around, because these enemies don't seem to stay still for long, and fair enough, they are being shot at, but come on lads. Now, there are a few interesting mechanics at play here. If you run up to an enemy and are positioned in the right place in front of them, 50 can do what's called a kill counter, which is essentially a one-shot takedown. You do have a bar that recharges before you can do it again, so you can't just spam it. But it's a neat little addition in there, and you can unlock additional kill counters in the hub part of the game, which we'll get to later, and it introduces a neat little scene. You are also able to steal from dead bodies. Now, this is done by going up to a dead body, holding the appropriate button, and it will make an item pop out. It's usually some money, but you can get armor from it as well. The main issue I had here is that you can only have a small number of bodies on screen at a time, or they'll just fade away. The limitations of the system may be at play here, but it was quite annoying to be running towards a body and have it just pop out of view as you are about to loot it. Now let's go back to the combat. Throughout this level, you get this mixture of tighter combat areas and larger combat arenas. The game does not feel great during the bigger arenas. You don't get much information on where the enemies are, the spawning of them can feel a bit random, and there's an aforementioned constant movement that just makes it feel random. Still, we do get through this level, and 50 has to defeat this enemy on a rooftop. It's like a boss-like enemy, but just as he does, he is shot 9 times in the back. Now, we know fine well that being shot that many times ain't going to keep our lad 50 down for long. He's patched up by a shady doctor, and he's out for some cheeky revenge. Our next section is 50's HUD, which is something of a hub area for you to roam around in. You can roam around in his apartment. You are introduced to a place to buy weapons from. You can buy additional meds, new kill counters, and music that can be played during the missions themselves. And what's neat about the music is that it isn't just the soundtrack to the game, but it actually takes from 50 Cent and G-Unit's discography. The characters in here have a few recognisable voices as well. Grizz, the arms dealer, is played by Dr. Dre. McVicker, the corrupt cop who helps 50, is played by Eminem. I cannot fault the presentation here. It does feel like a genuine effort has been made, not just in pulling in those appropriate people, but to nail the feeling of being 50 Cent and that world that he sort of, I guess the character of 50 Cent inhabits through his music and what he and like G Unit talk about in, you know, in their songs and such. It's just that effort has been made to capture that. Now, plot-wise, we learn from McVicker that K-Dog has been taken into protective custody by some government types. He's being held in a safe house somewhere in New York City. 50 sets off to infiltrate the joint and figure out what's going on, so it's off to the subway for our next location. Now, the infiltration does not go well. I don't know how seriously the game wants me to take stealth, but it really felt like I didn't have much of a choice here. There's no feedback from enemies or surroundings. It just felt, again, like he's an enemy. Oh no, they've spotted you. But once spotted, we go back to the problem I highlighted earlier. When in the open, the combat feels like a chore. It's uncoordinated. The enemies are running at you with reckless abandon or just randomly around. This is a pattern that repeats throughout the course of the game. And I really feel like had they tightened up this aspect and made it a little bit slower and more strategic, it could be a lot better. Still, nothing here is bad. The presentation, I keep going back to it, is fine. The gunplay is capable. It's quite satisfying when you are able to shoot and get through those areas. There's also a mechanic where if you hover over an enemy weak point and fire, it does like a kill cam type thing. The graphics here are fine. The one thing that maybe stood out as a little bit silly early on is the music loops. For every situation, you'll be getting this little loop of music, which can seem quite silly when it's like a gunfight with like two people that's over in 5 seconds. But that can be remedied because you can select which songs you want to play throughout the game. So if you want to listen to the entirety of Get Rich or Die Trying throughout it, you can do so. And to go back to that, the really cool thing is that you can have the songs themselves, or you can have the instrumental versions. So, you know, shooting people whilst the beat to In the Club is playing in the background is an absolute highlight of the experience. Now, story-wise, we get to K-Dog a little bit too late. He's already dead, but 50, being the fantastic detective that he is, notices there's a tattoo on his arm which he thinks is worth investigating us. So, this leads us meeting up with a guy called Bugs, again, part of 50's hood. He owns the pawn shop there, but he's also a hacker. He finds a voicemail leading us to the leader of a local biker gang who happens to have this same tattoo. Naturally, things absolutely kick off, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but it's the same problem that pops up here that it has done in the previous mission, and it'll pop up again and again. Open environments, awkward, tighter, more focused locations, play better. This is the pattern of the game level to level, but it was never enough to put me off. There were times when I found myself maybe getting a little bit annoyed by the random nature of it and the way it played out, but I don't think there was a time where I was not having fun. And it's worth noting here as well that throughout a good handful of missions you'll be accompanied by a member of G Unit or supporting cast members, and the friendly AI isn't too bad. They don't get in the way, they're invincible so you don't have to worry about them, and they do a good job of holding their own during the fights. So I think we've covered a lot of the main parts of the game, so let's just go back and wrap this one up. After about 6 or so hours, I completed the game, and do you know what? I actually really enjoyed it. I am not going to claim that this game is an absolute hidden gem and, you know, vastly underrated or whatever, but I came out of the game having enjoyed it, and I do think some of the lower review scores were incredibly harsh towards it. This game to me plays like a very solid 6 out of 10. It would have been an ideal rental for most back in the day. It was something you could smash out over a weekend. Now, if you were a fan of 50 Cent or G Unit, then maybe that score would be elevated because there's a bit of replayability here. You can replay missions to earn more money, to unlock more things throughout the game, more of the music and have it play. Plus, in 50's crib, you actually can watch some documentaries and making of stuff, which feature him. Now, the game is flawed, and maybe with a bit more time in the oven, they'd been able to iron out some of those flaws, but it did a good job of keeping me engaged and wanting to get through it. The one striking issue, which I'm sure you're fed up with me harping on about, was the combat. It was Jekyll and Hyde. It is the sticking point for most people, given it was the bulk of the game. When it was good, felt very good, but it struggled to maintain that consistency. But overall, the presentation here was great. I liked the plot. I don't feel the game took itself too seriously. Again, a solid 6 out of 10. And it makes me wonder, and maybe this is a discussion for a bigger video or people much cleverer than I, and it's maybe impossible to say, but I wonder if a lot of the negative reception towards this game came because it is a game based on 50 Cent. Some of those lower scores imply a game that's unplayable. A 2 out of 10, that's an unplayable game, but this game is far better than a 2 out of 10. So how much of the game's negative reception came from having this negative viewpoint going into it? Came because it's a game based on 50 Cent and G-Unit. People who are popular in the mainstream but divisive in the nerdier communities. There is perhaps something to be said for how we, in these sorts of communities, react to things that come from outside. We dismiss things because they aren't what we want, despite the fact that they might end up being bloody good. We go in with this negative attitude, so is it no wonder that sometimes we leave remaining negative? I'm not immune to this. I'm not better than anyone else because I'm guilty of this. I've mentioned my own past snobbish attitudes. I remember back in the day getting Guitar Hero 2 for the Xbox 360, and I was appalled that one of the loudly touted new songs was going to be by My Chemical Romance, and it was dead. Oh no, what a horrible band, emo, ugh. Do you know what happened? I played that song. I'd never heard it before. I never heard anything by My Chemical Romance. I just knew the image. I absolutely fell in love with it, and the album became one of my favourites. I love the theatricality. I love it's a concept album. I love the talent involved with it. It's such a great rock album. And yet, my attitudes and preconceptions going in, I was incredibly dismissive. And then, a couple of years later, Lady Gaga came along, and I was dismissive of pop music, and I heard the song Just Dance, and oh, this is horrible. You know, only into rock and metal. But I saw the video for Paparazzi, again, the theatrics, the drama in it, and I gave it a chance, and I listened to that album that it was from, The Fame, and subsequently The Fame Monster, and some of my favourite albums. They're so good. I'm not saying you have to fall madly in love with these things, but I am saying life is more interesting if you let yourself be that little bit more open-minded. So like I say, this isn't a great game, but it's not an awful one. It sits in a fairly middling area. Flawed but fun. Interesting but not boring. And for me, sometimes that's absolutely fine. So with all that said, I really hope you enjoyed watching this. Do let me know what you thought of the game and the video. Have I intrigued you enough to give it a try? Did you play it back in the day? What were your thoughts on it? And please do leave comments and let me know. And also do give the video a like, subscribe to the channel for more retro gaming goodness, and I shall see you all again for another video. Goodbye.